All right, cool. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to continue on the lecture. This is part 2 of Introduction to Accounting Theory, week 1. So we've been through what is a theory, and we've been through this idea that there are two different types of theories, normative and positive theories. Normative theories explain what should be, all right? So what is good, and therefore what should you do about it, right? Positive theories are more scientific, okay? And they're only going to explain and predict the way humans behave or a particular phenomena. They're not necessarily saying whether it's good or bad. I didn't write this up before, but I'll do it now. It's very quick. Objective versus subjective judgments. So objective, this is sort of things that you know, but you find hard to explain because you've never had to explain them clearly. Right? What's the difference? What's the difference between objective and subjective, guys? True for all. You know what? That's not a bad definition. I like it. I'm going to give you a slightly different definition that it doesn't disagree. Objective is when you have a measurement and we measure it against another object, all right? And the measurement is external to the person that's doing the measurement. Subjective is when you make a measurement and it's inside the person that's doing measuring, okay? So this is a measurement made outside the observer. The person that's doing the measuring or watching, right? Subjective is a measurement or a something from inside the observer. Let me give you a good example. Star Wars, the recent Star Wars. Good film or bad film? Who's seen it? Yeah, good or bad?
Good.
Good. Okay, episode 1 and Jar Jar Binks. Good or bad?
Bad. I haven't watched it since I was 6.
And you don't want to. It didn't happen. you delete it from your memory if you've even got the memory still, right? Yeah, okay, so is that Jar Jar Binks in episode 1? I give that, 1 star, okay? Whereas the new one, you give it how much?
Give it a good 3.5.
3.5 stars, okay.
Out of 5.
Oh, 5 out of 5 stars, okay.
No, 3.5 out of 5.
3.5 out of 5, okay, cool. So you've just given me a measurement. Is that measurement something that we can all objectively agree on?
No.
No, it's definitely subjective, okay? So you've given it a value, but where does it come from? I just freaking liked it, man. What do you want, Whereas an objective thing is like, how tall are you? What we can do is we can get a measuring tape and we can measure this and find out that Phillip is exactly, 182 centimeters high. And that when you measure me, I'm 182. When I measure, the next person measures me, it's 182. We always get the same answer. That's because we're always looking at the same object to make that measurement. Does that make sense? So you're going to get a lot more agreement here. A lot more agreement. Whereas here, you're going to get disagreements because it depends on your taste. So I like this definition of true for all, and it depends on your taste. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Bang on it, okay? So we want to try and make sure that our theories, or indeed the accounts that we provide, are as objective as possible. But unfortunately, there's going to be times when it comes to valuation where it's just flat out subjective, okay? How much is that jet aircraft worth, or market value? Oh, there's not an active market. Okay, well, it's worth we're going to have to make the numbers up sometimes, right? But if we can be as objective as possible, where we always look at something and say it's worth this much because here is the sale history of other light aircraft, that's much better. We'll have much fewer disagreements. Okay, cool. So that's the difference between objective and subjective. What about the parts of a theory? All right. So logic, evidence, conclusions, assumptions, arguments, hypotheses, and fallacies. These are all specific terms, and I'm not going to test the terms directly, but I will use the terms throughout the entire semester. Okay, so I think it's just worthwhile defining these. This is not a formal course in logic, okay, but it's worthwhile having a talk about it. Logic is the structure you use to demonstrate the truth of your idea. Okay, it's sometimes known as the method that you use. How are you going to demonstrate? How do you show me? Okay. Now, I might use numeric evidence, and I might use survey data from this year and some other statistical data from somewhere else. That's just more evidence, but I'm using the same method to do so. Does that make sense? All right. So we'll come back to logic when we have a look at different types of reasoning, inductive and deductive reasoning. Okay. But for the moment, I just want to say that logic is how you prove it. Next thing is the evidence. Okay. What's the difference between evidence and proof? Evidence versus proof. It's kind of like how data and information not the same.
Proof is being 100% truth.
Ooh, I like that. That's very good. 100% proof is something.
Fact. Maybe.
No arguments, right? Yeah, it's a fact. If you said that's a good way of saying it. Yeah. What's evidence? How's evidence different?
It just adds
Evidence
to the puzzle, doesn't necessarily prove, or it could prove or disprove.
Adds to the idea. You can have like positive evidence that like helps you, or you can have evidence that's like not helping you. I mean, particularly in a court case, you know, someone provides evidence that I committed the crime. Yeah, well, that's not good for me. Yeah. So it adds to the idea. Sure. What's the difference here? Keep going.
Evidence is to prove something.
Is evidence proof though?
No, but it has potential to be used to prove which.
Oh, that is better. That's better. Okay, so they're not the same, but this can be used as proof. Okay, so a thing, an item, a fingerprint on, you know, in a court case or whatever, that could be a piece of evidence, or I could bring it to you and go, look, proof. Yeah? Absolute proof, right? So a thing can be both evidence and proof. Right. So what makes this proof and more than evidence?
Upon testing.
Come on. There's something, a fingerprint, a photo of somebody doing something. All right? A DNA test. You know, it's easy to think about court cases here, right? A single piece of evidence can become proof. Okay, what makes it proof? Well, I mean, but all the other evidence that you've provided is also true.
Guess it all depends on what explanation is used with the evidence.
Getting closer? Not quite, but pretty good, yeah? All right, a thing, or whatever the hell it is, right? This can become proof, and it can be proof to one person, but evidence to another person. I'm trying to drop you hints here. I look at that and I go, it's pretty convincing evidence, but it's not proof. And you go, of course it's proof. See? It's proof because it convinced me. Does that make sense? So proof is the thing, or it's the bit of evidence that convinced you. And I want to be real clear about this. What you find evidence, someone else might think is proof positive, for sure. Can't argue with it, right? This is particularly interesting when you start talking about religious ideas. Someone says to me, oh, look, Phillip, all right, because I grew up in a fairly strongly Christian family, which I'm still attached to the family. all right. But people come to me and they go, look at God's glory. This is proof that God loves us. I'll be like, it's a rainbow, man. You know what I mean? Okay. For that person, what they're saying to me is that this is wondrous, this is amazing, this is proof of God's love, right? And I'm like, no, this is proof of light traveling through the air. Okay. All right, is it evidence that it's wonderful and amazing? Yeah. Do I think that God exists? Maybe. Yeah, sure, right? But it's not. That thing isn't proof to me, right? Something else might be proof that God does or does not exist, right? When I come to you and say, this is a great company, you should invest in it, and I provide you with evidence, if you buy the share, then it must have been proof because you were convinced that I was right. All right? Does it mean it's a good share? Who knows? Maybe it wasn't. All right? We'll find out in 10 years. Yeah? So proof is very hard. Proof is hard. And a lot of people throw around this word of, I've proven a theory. Maybe not. Right? Let's be more critical when we think about it. Okay, so we've been through logic, we've been through evidence. Let's have a look at conclusions. A conclusion is the so what part of a theory. A conclusion is what the theory does. I give you a normative theory about how we should stop directors from lying, cheating, and stealing. This is how I'm going to do it. It's there to stop people lying, cheating, and stealing. All right, it's the or in a positive theory, it's the explanation part. Yeah. Assumptions. An assumption is anything you take as being true without demanding strict evidence or strict proof. My uncle used to tell me, Philip, you're making assumptions. This is very dangerous because I used to have all sorts of ideas about what to invest in, and then I lost a lot of money, like an idiot. And he goes, Philip, you're making a lot of assumptions about these firms that you're investing in. And you know what's wrong with assumptions? They make an ass out of you and me when we make assumptions. Don't do it, right? Now, that was kind of actually not very helpful here because I lost money anyway. But assumptions here are not necessarily bad when you have a formal theory. You need them. You cannot go and dig through everything. Why? You're just going to have to stop and accept some things as being true before you can do the thing that you're doing right now. Yeah? You have to trust some things. Yeah? And that's not bad, but there are two types of assumptions. Number one, articulated and assumed. Well, not articulated. I'm using the wrong word here. What's my notes say? Conscious and unconscious is the words I used. Conscious, or two, subconscious or unconscious. I'm going to write subconscious. Conscious assumptions, right? It's the subconscious ones that are dead set dangerous. So if I'm trying to look at a certain block of shares and saying whether they're good in investing in, I'm going to assume some certain things. I'm going to assume that the inflation rate will be 2% for the next 2 years, or for the next 10 years. Right? I'm going to assume that the economy is going to grow at 1% GDP per annum, right? Whatever, right? But if I say it, I'm conscious of that assumption. And we can critique it, all right? If it's conscious, it is open to critique. What's the difference between criticism and critique? Criticism can mean that you're looking at it and thinking about it in a critical way. That's good. Criticism can also just mean, I don't like you, it's an attack, right? Critique is always about, like, we're going to question it. So this is what I mean. We want to be, you can't not have assumptions. You have to have assumptions, all right? But you need to take those assumptions out of your gut and put them in your head. When they're in your head, you can say them in words, all right? And once you take them out of your gut and put them in your head, all of a sudden you might realize, hey, that's a pretty stupid assumption, all right? Or it's a very biased assumption, or it's racist assumption, or it's assuming bad things about people I don't know about, or whatever, right? You could have some very scary assumptions that are in your gut that are driving your judgments. But until you actually put them in your head and you say them, they will float around in the subconscious, they will bias your results, and they could end up with some very wrong answers. Whereas if you put them consciously, then you can critique them, and that's better. You're much more likely to get to the truth that way. Cool. So, assumptions. Next one is a hypothesis. A hypothesis, a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a theory that is ready to be tested. A hypothesis is a theory ready to be tested, i.e. not yet proven or not yet trusted. I don't like this word proof because when we come back to it with proper falsification, we'll find that it's very hard to prove anything. You can have an idea, and it starts off as this vague, stupid idea, and it's just unstructured and everything. Then you start doing a bit of research, then you try and find some evidence, and you start building it up. When you're ready to start comparing the evidence against your idea, if the evidence doesn't match, then your theory will fail. But you have to test your theory. You have to compare it against the evidence. That's what a hypothesis is. It's a theory that's not yet been proven, but is ready, it's structured enough to be tested. Cool, let's move on. Last one is a fallacy. Fallacy is an argument or an idea. It's actually an argument, but let's write idea here. That sounds logical, and therefore it sounds trustworthy. But, in actual fact, is false, or at least misleading. Fallacies, there's two types of them. There's fallacies of relevance and fallacies of insufficient evidence. I won't put that on the exam, okay? I'm just going to tell you because I want you to be aware of them. All right, there's a fallacy of relevance and a fallacy of insufficient evidence. Okay, and there's about 20 of these things. We're not doing a course on formal logic, so I'm just going to leave it there, all right? But you may find in class where I say, tell me why you think this is relevant or that, tell me why you think the shareholders are right or wrong, okay? And if you give me an argument and I go, that sounds right, but it's actually a fallacy because blah, it's an argument that is self-defeating in some way. When you're watching TV, sometimes you'll see these arguments presented and you'll be like, oh, that sounds about right, but actually, is it helping? No way. The argument is bad, right? And so we should not take it into account. Okay, we're getting very close to the end. There are essentially, I'm not going to worry about measurement this week because I think if you can remember normative and positive, and you can remember inductive and deductive, I think that we're a winner. All right, those are the most important things that I need you to remember from week one. Let's get back onto that logic part. I was talking about how logic is the structure of how you demonstrate your idea is correct. Reasoning, or logic. Logic and reasoning, yeah? Okay, so we have basically three methods. There are more than this, but Deegan in his textbook and indeed in this class, I'm really only going to test the first two, and that's inductive and deductive. So inductive arguments and deductive arguments. Deductive arguments are true by their own merit. Inductive arguments will look at the tendency or the probability of the situation. All right, let me give you an example to make it clear. If an angle is greater than 90 degrees, then it is obtuse. So if I spelled that correctly, obtuse. Not truce, obtuse. Obtuse. Yep, sorry, my bad. B, I look at this angle, turns out it is 120 degrees. Yep. C, therefore, this angle here, the angle must be, and the must is important, right, for it to be a deductive argument, must be obtuse. Proven, yeah? Now, it could actually turn out that your measurement is bad. It could turn out that you were drunk and you're measuring something wrong, okay? There could be all sorts of errors here, but ignoring that parts of the evidence, it's this logic, A and B, and therefore C, that's a deductive argument, okay? So even if the evidence is bad, the deductive statement is true. Does that make sense? Yep, it is logical, even if the evidence is bad. Inductive arguments, on the other hand, they look at the tendency or the probability of the situation. So A, Joe is human. B, most humans are right-handed. In fact, it's about 70%-ish. Use their, that's his right hand, yep. It's on our left, but whatever, okay. Yep. C, therefore, is Joe right-handed?
Well, according to the picture, he looks pretty right-handed to me. But...
Okay, therefore, it is likely.
Likely. That's better.
But not proven. That's what that's the difference between inductive and deductive here, right? Yeah, it is likely that Joe will be right-handed. Maybe he's not, but the probability is that. Yeah. So in this sense here, what you can find is that this one here, if any of the arguments fail, this entire thing here will fail, right? But if any of the parts here fail, all right, that will just affect the probability of something being true, right? So oftentimes deductive arguments are depicted like this, where you start off with a theory, or you start off with the idea, and then you will have a hypothesis, This is not in the textbook, by the way, this little picture, but Deegan talks about it, but he doesn't draw this picture. Whatever, it's the same idea, right? From that hypothesis, you will then go and find observations or reasons or rationale, right? And then once you've put it all together and said, does this match that, then you can have confirmation.
Or rejection.
Or rejection. You're right, I'll put rejection underneath. But you've come to a conclusion based on that, right? Induction, on the other hand, is, it has to start with data, all right? It must. So you have data or you have observation. When you have the data observation, you will find that you come up with patterns. With those patterns, you can go, why is this happening? So you might come up with some plausible explanation. Plausible explanation. That's why we've got these patterns here. And finally, when you've got enough data and enough, you've proven it sufficiently, you then have a theory, a confirmed theory. Well, so what the hell does this matter? Okay. These are two different ways of proving your idea. You can prove it inductively or deductively, okay? For example, I have certain ideas in my head about what makes for good teaching and how students learn, right? So I could say deductively, students are in this particular type of thing, therefore I will do this, it will come out with this outcome. Or alternatively, I don't know. I've noticed that students like this, so if I do it more frequently, does it achieve the outcome that I've received? In any case, these are two different ways, but they're quite different in the sense that here, you're starting with the data. Here, you're starting with the idea first, and you're trying to prove the idea once you've had it. This one here, you're not so predetermined or prejudiced in some senses, right? Here, this inductive argument tends to be favoured by people using positive theories. Yeah? Positive theories try to explain and predict the way that people behave, that something happens, right? So oftentimes, you don't want to try and put your own idea about what is good or bad, right? So first off, you're going to start with what you can see, and you're going to try and explain why things happen. So you'll find that positive theories often rely on inductive arguments. That being said, sometimes you don't have data, so you can deductively reason why that might be the case. If you're a normative person and you're starting to say, we should change the laws because we want to have a better outcome, right? It's very hard to sort of start saying, well, look at this data here if you're proposing something that doesn't exist currently, okay? For example, let's say I wanted to do something crazy. I'll use a crime example. Let's say that I wanted to make LSD and hard drugs legally available, right? And I think everybody should have access to hallucinogens for some reason, right? I cannot use any inductive evidence because there are no first world rich countries that allow hardcore drugs available, right? I have absolutely no data, absolutely no patterns to work with here. But I can still make a case, right? I can still say that normatively this should be the case, but I'm going to be forced to rely on deductive arguments, right? Because I have no data to work with. I'm starting with a theory, and now I'm trying to find different reasons as to why I'm proving it. Okay. But I want to make it clear. Even if you're a positivist, you can use deductive arguments. Generally, you'll rely on this, though. You're not locked into it. If you're a normative person, or looking at a normative idea, generally, you'll use these sorts of arguments. Right? But if you've got any evidence to prove whether it's true or not. So let's say, for example, corporate crime, right? Corporate crime's bad. We should put these corporate governance rules in to prove that, to stop stealing, yeah? I can deductive reasoning how they should be structured, and then I could go to Europe and say, did they work? And I could use inductive arguments to prove whether they did or did not. Does that make sense? So just because you're in one camp or the other camp doesn't mean to say that you're locked into this method or that method, all right? But generally, normative people will prefer this. Generally, positive will prefer that, okay? These are the 4 ideas you must not forget this week. You must know them by the end of the course. They probably will be on the exam, all right? Normative, what is it, guys? What ideas telling us what we should do, they invariably have some sort of moral bent to them. Yep.
Based on moral values.
Yeah, this is good or bad. How do we stop it? Positive ideas, what are they? More scientific explanations, not saying good or bad, right?
Past observation.
Correct. Inductive arguments, logic shows tendency, all right, based on the data. Deductive, it's based on the arguments, how you structure it, okay? Do not forget those ones. The other stuff, I don't really care if you forget it so much, but if you forget these 4, I'll be pretty, I'll chase you, okay? Is that cool, guys? Thank you very much. I'm sorry I forgot the tutorial questions, so we'll get to those next week. Thank you very much.